Hello, my name is Sheba Simpson-Amsterdam, and I'm an advocate, activist, author, and educational disruptor for Black students in New York City public schools. The title of this presentation is Check Your Biases in Schools. While you are listening and watching this presentation, please keep this quote in mind. It's okay to see the race of the students you teach. How you teach students because of their race is what matters. It is no secret that teachers play a crucial role in the lives of their students. They are responsible for imparting knowledge and helping to shape young minds. They also play a key role in unlocking each of their students' individual unique abilities and potential. It is through education that we gain the knowledge and skills necessary to succeed in life. Everyone deserves the opportunity to receive a quality education, regardless of race, background, or circumstances. But what happens when teachers themselves are biased against their students? Unfortunately, this is all too common. Studies have shown that teachers often hold unconscious biases against Black students. These biases can manifest in everything from teachers in how they interact with their students, to the type of assignments they give, and to the way they grade Black students. You cannot teach who you don't see and value. This is a simple truth, but one that is often forgotten in the education debate. When we talk about teachers, we need to remember that they are human beings with their own lived experiences. And those experiences shape how they see and interact with their Black students. Black students, for example, are more likely to be seen as disruptive, unruly, and loud by teachers. Teachers are more likely to have lower expectations of Black students and are more likely to refer them to special education services. In fact, a recent study found that Black students who perceive their teachers as biased are more likely to drop out of high school. This is particularly because of the long history of racism in America, which has led to harmful stereotypes of Black people and students in particular, which is being perpetuated by the popular culture and within the education system itself. Also, non-English speaking Black immigrant students may also feel invisible to teachers who don't understand their unique and different circumstances and cultures. These students may face language barriers or may be anxious about their status in the country. As a result, they may not speak up in class or participate in school activities. These biases have a profound impact on Black students that are long-lasting. They can feel devalued and invisible in the classroom, which can lead to lower grades and fewer opportunities. According to New York University professor and education historian Diane Ravitch, biases in teachers is one of the most difficult problems to solve because it involves human nature and emotions. The problem that teachers have with bias is not a new one. It has come into sharper focus in recent years because society has become racially and ethnically diverse, whether it's based on race, ethnicity, or just socioeconomic status. Teachers can often be found discriminating against Black students who they don't see as valuable. This has been brought to light recently when a study found that teachers are far less likely to recommend Black students for gifted and talented programs. The study also found that teachers were 2.5 times more likely to recommend white students for gifted and talented programs than Black students. Sit with that for a moment. This is not just an issue of fairness. When Black students are not given the same opportunities as their white counterparts, it hurts us all. A diverse population is a strength, not a liability. When it comes to teachers, what we see is what we get. In other words, the teachers that are in our schools are a reflection of the larger society. And if we want to consider teacher biases in the classroom, we need to first start by looking at who teachers are and why their biases exist in the first place. Teachers, like all of us, are products of their environment. They come from families, communities, and cultures that have shaped their values and beliefs. And just as importantly, they have been influenced by social media, news outlets, their peers, other adults throughout their lives. All of these factors play a role in shaping a teacher's worldview that they bring into the classroom. The good news is that there are steps that can be taken to counteract teacher biases in the classroom and within school communities. The first thing is acknowledge that you have them. This is the first and most important step. If you are not aware of your biases, you never will be able to address them. Second, be open to feedback. If someone points out a biases you have, listen to what they have to say and try to understand where they're coming from. Be willing to sit with your uncomfortableness while learning your unbiases that have harmed Black children for decades. 3, be willing to change. Once you've identified a bias, be open to changing your behavior or beliefs. This can be difficult, but it's necessary if you want to create a more inclusive environment for all of your students to thrive. 4, be an ally, a true ally. If you see someone is being treated unfairly, speak up. Show your students that you're an ally and that you're committed to creating a fair and just classroom for everyone. 5, educate yourself, read. Learn about the experiences that groups of people that are different than your own. It will help you to better be able to understand their perspectives and lived experiences. These steps won't solve the problem of teacher biases overnight, but they're a good place to start. If teachers are willing to acknowledge their own biases and work to change them, they can create amazing classrooms that are more inclusive and welcoming, and for all students to feel valued and seen. Only then will we be able to provide what students need and give them the education they deserve. Black history is important because the accomplishments and tribulations of Black people matter, and we will not be continued to be washed out of history. Again, my name is Sheba Simpson-Amsterdam, and I can be found on all social media platforms at Sheba Simpson NYC, and my website, I'm on assignmentinc.com.
Good day, Black Speakers Network. My name is Rickie Burney. I am the founder of Emerging Excellence LLC, the author of Destined for Greatness, 90 Days of Transformational Affirmation, and a millennial transformation strategist who shifts the possibilities of professionals and organizations they support through the intervention of stagnation and the implementation of intention. You can connect with me on all platforms, rickie.burney.speaks, RICKIE.BURNEY.speaks, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So today we are speaking about a phenomenon that is prevalent in organizations globally, and that is unconscious bias and prejudgment. Now, I know many of you may have had an experience in your lifetime where you just thought you had the experience and the enthusiasm going into the interview that this was yours, but for some reason you felt a disconnect with that interviewer. And sure enough, you received the rejection letter. Cause some cognitive dissonance of what did you do wrong, or what is it about you that did not get you the job? So I'll alleviate that for you and just let you know that a lot of times it's not about you, but it's about them, or more so, what's within them, the biases that exist within us. In my over 13 years of experience in talent acquisition, I have seen some amazing talent get passed over, so much so that I have made it a mission of mine to make sure that people are equipped with the tools to make sure that their value overshadows any distraction that tries to come into the experience. Now, as we are speaking about bias, we have to consider a few myths that are out there about it. Number one, bias only involves race. And yes, bias can be about race in a lot of organizations that may have limited diversity. That might be the top one, but it's not the only one. So some other biases that might come into play could be your age, gender, orientation, even your attire and your accent. It could be literally any aspect of a person. The other myth is that bias means that you have bad character. Well, let me tell you, anyone can engage in bias at any moment. That could be me. That could be you. That could be anyone, because a lot of times it's something that is subconsciously happening in which we engage in this prejudice. But once it becomes to a conscious level, that's when we start to question a person's character to see if it's a representation of who they are. Now, it cannot be eliminated. I know that seems negative, but on a more optimistic standpoint, we can minimize it to the point where our value is the top part of what shows in that experience. So how do we do that? First, we have to identify some of the places where bias starts to enter the conversation. And it's one thing that we all engage in, not even aware of it, and that is first impressions. Yes, the one thing we're told that makes a difference is those first 30 seconds or that first 2 minutes where a person decides everything they need to know about you. Yes, first impressions are important, but when we rely solely on them, we compromise the integrity of our judgment and the integrity of our discernment. So what are some manifestations of what that looks like with first impressions? The halo effect. And what the halo effect means, that we latch onto that positive aspect that we saw about a person, and then we discount anything that could be negative or concerning about their effectiveness to do the job. So a person might be dressed to the T, but we have discounted what they're saying and the other things that they're doing that we might need to take into account to make sure this is really the person that we need for this. Another thing is confirmation bias. So on the flip side, a person might not necessarily have the most polished shoes, and we might generalize that person as not a good representation of themselves, but there could be other redeeming qualities, characteristics, and skills that they possess that would make them the best candidate. But because we latch on to the one thing that triggered us, we have not created a truly informed decision on true fit for the job. And finally, affinity bias, which is when we generally gravitate towards people who are similar to us. So someone who's going to the same school as us. We both went to an HBCU, the same HBCU, and automatically we think that person's going to be the best person for the job, just because of the similarities in your experiences and background. But the truth is, that might be a time where we may be discounting some very vital information for us to make the best decision. So even when we have these certain networks, we have to be very mindful that we are not engaging in affinity bias. So outside of that, what are some other ways that might be not non-malicious? Some things that we might engage in that might cause us to engage in bias is tight deadlines. It could be also overwhelming workloads and just limited experiences with different populations. No matter how cultured you are, you have not experienced every single person, and you will find yourselves doing the generalizations, having the shortcuts, especially if it's the overwhelming workloads, which in turn actually makes your workload more burdensome because you are discounting potential candidates because they don't fit into a mold. And ultimately that suffers, the brand suffers in terms of their reputation, as well there is financial loss because of that. So really, are the shortcuts and the generalizations worth the risk that it also creates? Now, as talent, how can we present ourselves in the best way that any distraction, any bias that is present does not supersede what we bring to the table? Very simple yet impactful ways that we can do that. Number one, on your resume, make sure that your email represents your professionalism over your personality. What does that mean? Do not have an email address that shows drop it like it's hot40@gmail.com, because yes, you might like to dance and show those Meg Thee Stallion knees, but does that really represent the trajectory that you want to do within that organization? Here's the rule of thumb. If your email address, when read aloud, causes you to feel embarrassment, shame, any negative emotion, that might mean that you need to change that. And change it to something that's simple and easy for you to remember, because if you have a difficult time recalling it, then that's going to cause some problems down the line as well. So make the process simpler for you and make it more representative of who you are. Also, on your resume, make sure that you add both the month and the year with your job experiences. That simple detail makes a monumental difference. Give you an example. Person can say they work for a company from 2020 to 2021. I can come to the conclusion you only worked there for a year, when in actuality, you worked there from January of 2020 to December of 2021, essentially saying you worked for the company for 2 years. So I could have created a narrative that was not true, instead of you taking ownership, taking those additional steps and shaping the narrative that shows the totality of your experience and your qualifications. So just take those extra steps because it makes a difference. The next one, in terms of your actual interview, is making sure that you do have the transparency, especially when we're talking about weaknesses, but also making sure that you're providing context as well. There is a difference between a weakness and a developmental opportunity. A weakness is something that you are not going to ever be good at. It's something that you're not strong at, and no matter what amount of effort you put, it's going to be the same way. A developmental opportunity, on the other hand, is something in which you may not be as strong in, but there's potential, and there's also intention to develop that even further. Make sure that in the interview process, you are prioritizing the developmental opportunities when they give you that question, because it shows, number one, that you're honest, but also that you are intentional with your growth, and that whatever you present to them is not going to be something that's going to be a problem for them going forward with you. The final thing is your ums and ahs. Simple as it's kept, it can happen to anyone, especially when your mind is racing faster than your mouth. For you, that's what it might be. For them, they might be perceiving that as you're not confident, that you're being deceptive, and you just don't know your true value. Do yourself a favor. Be more gradual and intentional with your pace. It gives your mind to process what you want to say next, but it also gives the interviewer the opportunity to process what you just said and truly internalize every single word that you say and make sure that they fully understand who you are and what you bring to the table. Now, these are all practical ways of being able to show up in the field, and I'm willing to do more in terms of providing tips. So again, just connect with me on all social media platforms. Thank you, Black Speakers Network, and I look forward to being able to collaborate with others and be able to fully show how we are a representation of Black excellence.
Greetings. I'm Dr. Maxine Bryant. I am the sole proprietor of Bryant Educational Seminars and Training, delivering the very best in training design and dynamics. I come to you today with over 30 years of experience in developing, designing, and facilitating workshops all over the country and, in fact, in many other parts of the world. Now, normally I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or team building, or trauma-informed care. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. You see, today, the Black Speakers Network has invited many of us to come and talk about Black history. I'm going to be focusing on the Gullah Geechee community. Now, some of you may be wondering who are they, and others may be wondering why I'm talking about them. Well, first of all, the Gullah Geechee community are the descendants of the original Africans who were brought to the southeast coast of the United States back in the 1700s. They were ripped from their countries, their villages in West Africa, and brought here against their will. But what they brought with them was their knowledge and their skills. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons they were captured was because of their knowledge about rice growing and because of their strength. Now, the Gullah Geechee people are the descendants of those original Africans, and because of a number of reasons that we'll talk about, they were able to save and honor and keep elements of their culture even now. Now, why am I talking about them? Because often when we talk about the African diaspora, that's a group that is often left out of the conversation. So we've told you who the Gullah Geechee people are and what they bring besides their dialect and their dance and their music and the drumming and the storytelling is a rich impact on not only the United States of America, but in actually the entire world. So one of the contributions that they made in the United States was in terms of wars. Now, the British often called on Africans to escape and join their military forces. It happened with the American Revolutionary War. During that time, Africans who would join forces with the British, so to speak, they did so in exchange for their freedom. Now, after the war, many of those British people went up to Canada and they didn't take, but voluntarily, many Africans who had escaped went with them. That's how Africans ended up in Canada. They became known as the Black Loyalists up in Canada. Now, another example is the War of 1812. Again, it was the British who entered Camden County in Georgia, and during that time, they again enlisted the assistance of blacks. And when blacks joined them in exchange for freedom in the military, when that particular war ended, many British dispersed to Trinidad. Many blacks went with them. And so we see evidence of the Gullah Geechee community, the Gullah Geechee culture, both in Canada and in Trinidad. Now, let's talk for a moment about the Underground Railroad. I bet many of you have been told that the Underground Railroad started south and went north. Maybe west, definitely north. How about not so? The very first Underground Railroad actually went south. You see, the Spaniards owned, or they inhabited Florida. That's what it's called now. It wasn't called that then. And they allowed Blacks who were enslaved to escape to Florida as a refuge, as a safe place. Many blacks went to Florida and converted to Catholicism, aligned themselves with the Spaniards long before the Underground Railroad began to go north. Now, what's interesting about this is that also in Florida, as a place of refuge, were the rebel Native Americans. They were called the Seminoles. Now, the Black Africans who went to Florida joined in with the Seminoles. They became known as the Black Seminoles. They intermarried. They formed their culture. The Gullah Geechee people from whom formed the Black Seminoles brought their culture with them. Now, the U.S. Army at some point, when it was trying to take over Florida, moved forcibly those group of Seminoles all the way to Oklahoma, which was then known as Indian Territory. We have Black Seminoles and Native Seminoles who went all the way to to Oklahoma and settled there. That's how we get Gullah Geechee culture, elements of it, as far west as Oklahoma. Now, not all of the Gullah Geechee people went north to Canada or west to Oklahoma. Some ended up in the Bahamas, Mexico, Texas. We see elements of their culture throughout the United States and, in fact, throughout the world. Now, you may be wondering, so what? What about this? Well, what's interesting is that the Gullah Geechee people introduced so many tools and medicines and ways of doing things, astronomy, navigation, all of that. And we're not taught that in our schools. For example, iron. Iron tools existed in West Africa long before the continent was penetrated by Europeans. Working with metal and iron has been a long African tradition. Also medicine, let's take a look at that. Along the coast of Georgia and South Carolina and Florida are the Sea Islands. These islands played a very important part, as a matter of fact, of the Gullah Geechee people being able to maintain their culture. You see, the enslavers, the plantation owners, lived on the mainland, and they would transport the captured Africans back and forth to the mainland as needed. Well, this separation enabled them to be able to develop their own culture, their own language. That language is really a blend of African languages that they combined so that they could understand one another. I was on one of those islands not too long ago. It's called Sapelo Island. And the tour guide gave me something from a plant, told me to chew on it. It numbed my mouth. I know that our ancestors used that same plant to be able to aid in a toothache, get rid of a pain, that type of thing. They brought that knowledge with them to the United States. As I said, navigation. Africans were navigating the waters long before Europeans were, but we're not taught that in our schools. As a matter of fact, the story is not told in our schools. Not correctly, anyway. Think about this. Africans from Africa were able to know and remember what it was like to be in Africa, and they told those stories to their children. Or their children would tell it to their children. But it got diluted. It, after a while, even lost its meaning because the older Africans were dying off. The story got muddled, and you already know if we're not the narrators of our own story, somebody else tells it, and they tell it how they want to tell it. Well, I vow to tell the whole truth, the whole story, the whole accurate story about Africans and the contributions of Gullah Geechee people so that they can be kept in the conversation about the African diaspora. As I close, I want to share a story with you that I hope will illuminate why I'm so very passionate about telling accurate African American history, accurate Black history, accurate Gullah Geechee history. The story is told of a young person who was walking along the beach, and up ahead he saw an older person bending down and getting up, and bending down and getting up. Curiosity got to the best of him, and he ran ahead, and he said to the old person when he got within earshot, What are you doing? The old person said, there's starfish strewn all over the ocean shore, and I'm picking them up and throwing them back out into the ocean so that they will live. If they stay on the sand, the sun's going to come up and scorch them to death. The young person looked and said, there are thousands of starfish. How are you going to make a difference? What difference can you possibly make? The older person bent down, picked up one starfish, threw it back out into the ocean, and said, for that one, I made a difference. So for everyone listening to this video who is inspired to learn more about African American history, I have made a difference. For one person who is educated now a little bit more about the Gullah Geechee culture, I have made a difference. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and I want to thank the Black Speakers Network for the opportunity to share about an often mysterious group of people who are left often out of the conversation about the African diaspora, the Gullah Geechee people. Thank you. Take care. Have a good day.
Create your future self. Yeah, create your future self. That's the whisper that was gnawing at my ear as I was driving down from Atlanta, Georgia to Orlando, Florida on one of the worst summer vacations I've ever taken my kids and my wife on. You see, create your future self was the exact message gnawing at my ear as I was thinking about how I was going to rent this car and book this hotel with jacked up credit. You see, I had to live check to check, even though I was earning over $80,000 per year. And create your future self was the message that kept digging into my mind as I was finally getting paid on Friday and driving to the rental-car place, renting the car with my debit card, because again, I had to wait for the money to hit my deposit. Create your future self was the exact message that I was hearing in my head as we were driving down 75 South to Orlando, and I'm speeding going 83 miles an hour, and I see the blue and red lights behind me. Again, it was Friday. I'm trying to make the best of a weekend for my kids' summer trip. We do this every summer, but this year it hit different. And create your future self was what I was thinking about as the officer politely wrote the speeding ticket and handed it to me. He said, yep, that would be probably about $150. You can pay that in about 3 weeks. That's how they talk down in South Georgia as you head over across the border from Georgia to Florida. Create your future self was the exact message that kept penetrating these ears as we pulled up to this crappy hotel. Now, mind you, my teenage kids may not have realized it was a crappy hotel, but Mrs. Johnson over here, she knew it was a crappy hotel. The kids stayed in one room, my wife and I stayed in another room, and the roaches kind of stayed in whatever room they wanted to stay in. It was a crappy hotel. Create your future self is what I kept thinking about as I watched every dollar in my account just dissipate as we were eating, as we tried to do any semblance of entertainment in Orlando for that day and a half that we were in Orlando. Create your future self is what kept penetrating my head as I thought about it. I couldn't get any sleep during that entire weekend. I just continued to think about what type of father, what type of husband, what type of man am I that this is the best that I could do for my kids' summer vacation. Create your future self was what I thought about as we drove back up to Atlanta on Sunday evening. And I'm looking in the rearview mirror and I see my teenage kids slumped over, sleeping on each other's shoulders. And I look over to my wife and she's also sleeping. But I looked into my eyes in that rearview mirror as well. And that's exactly what kept gnawing at my ear. Brother, you got to create your future self. And again, I heard that gnawing, irritating message as we pulled into our driveway back in Atlanta. And my kids got in and got settled, washed up, and went to bed. And my wife fixed a quick snack, took a shower, and laid down. But I had to stay up. And there were 3 things that I did to start the journey to create my future self. Number 1, I pulled out this notepad and I wrote a line right down the middle of that notepad. And on the left side of that notepad, I wrote down all of the obstacles, distractions, the things that were preventing me from becoming the man that I wanted to become, the man that I wanted to create. And on the other side of that document, I wrote down what the man that I wanted to become would be doing. What are his habits? What would his bank account look like? Where would we live? What would we drive? What kind of business or income would I generate? And what type of vacations we would really take? And again, I looked over at that left side and it was all the distractions and obstacles, the collection items on my credit report. Again, I'm a collection manager for 50 people, making 80 plus a year, but I'm dodging the calls every time they come in, telling me that, Mr. Johnson, this is an attempt to collect the debt. Any information obtained may be used for that purpose. And I thought about all of the things that I was doing to impress people and friends and family that really weren't helping me with my financial situation. And I thought about all of those things and I wrote those things down. That was the first thing that I did, is just wrote down the distractions and obstacles. And on the other side of the paper, I wrote down the goals, the dreams that I wanted to accomplish in this new life that I was going to create. The second thing that I did is I visualized the man that I wanted to become, the father that I wanted to become, the husband that I wanted to become. And I'm talking about, I got gritty with it, specific. What would he wear? What would his morning routine look like? Where would he go? What would his business be? What would he do with his day? What kind of conversations would he have? What would his engagement be with his wife, with his kids, with his coworkers or business colleagues, with the people at the grocery store, the people at the bank? I had to visualize that man. I had to see him closing on real estate, writing business transactions and contracts. I had to visualize it. I had to see it for myself. And then my more extended talk about create your future self, I talk about what cologne he would wear. What would the colors in the room look like on the day that I became the man that I wanted to become? So I wrote down the things that I wanted to do and the obstacles in my way. Number 2, I visualized the exact life that that man would have, the routines he would follow, the things that he would do, conversations he would have. And the third thing that I did that night was I began to affirm by speaking in real time the things that I would do. You know, I am healthy. I am happy. I began to write down mantras which have evolved throughout the years. And my mantra today is this: I am a leader of profitable businesses and properties that make a positive impact on others. I create the freedom, resources, and legacy that I desire. I use my voice and energy to inspire others. I am healthy. I am happy. I am wealthy. I am responsible. I am a debt-free, abundant man. I am a leader in financial surplus and positive energy always. I am present for my wife, my kids, and my grandkids. And my thoughts become things. See, that's a mantra. I'm speaking into existence the man that I wanted to become. And I live that life today. And you see, to create your future self, you have to do those things, at least to start. You've got to write down the things that are keeping you from being the person that you want to be. And on that same sheet of paper, write down the goals that you want to accomplish. Be specific about that. I'm talking about an exact dollar amount, an exact date that you have in mind, a place that you'll be, what you'll do. Those things have to be written down and read throughout the day constantly. So that's number one, write it down. Number two, to create your future self, you must visualize, see it. Close your eyes and see that person already in the real form, in present tense. And number three is very important. You got to speak it. Life and death, success and failure lies within the tongue. You must speak it on a consistent basis. Speak the life that you want for yourself. Not the negative things. Don't talk about the news and gossiping and all the bad things and the bills and the debts and the health issues, things that's going on. That's not the future you. To create your future self, you got to speak into existence the person that you want to become. And you got to believe it. I know it's hard, but you got to believe it. So you too can create your future self by writing things down, by visualizing that truth and speaking them into existence. My name is Victor Vonico Johnson. You can follow me for more great wisdom on how to create your future self on my Create Your Future Self YouTube channel. And if you're ready to book me to come and inspire your team and bring all this great energy and wisdom, you can book me through VictorVJohnson.com. God bless. Go create your future self.
Considering the LGBTQ's rights and diversity in the workplace, you want to make sure that your team, your organization, and even you yourself are providing optimum and intentional support. So in this video, I'm going to give you 4 different challenges and how you can overcome them. Is this thing on? Now, if this is your first time to the channel, I want to welcome you. I am Dr. David Glover, and it is my mission to share moments that inspire both leadership and self-development. So if that's you, click the subscribe button. Let's have that conversation. And don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified every time a new video comes out. I put them out weekly. Now, before I even begin this conversation that is so very needed, so very vital, I want to give you a couple statistics. Over half, about half, should I say, of lesbian, gay, and bi employees, and over 90% of trans community employees have experienced discrimination and harassment. In fact, most states still don't provide legal protection for the LGBT community. And studies have shown that openly gay employees are 3 times more productive than those who feel that they still have to hide their identity. I want to say that last statistic, that studies have shown that openly gay employees are 3 times more productive than those who feel that they have to hide their identity while at work. What does that say to us? It says that it is very vital for us to create an environment that is healthy and inclusive and diverse. And I'm going to show you 4 different ways. So number 1 is to allow self-identification without retaliation. One of the major hurdles that is said in data extraction from the communities is that they are afraid to self-identify who they are because of retaliation. So you have to be able to create a culture that allows them to say who they are, to be who they are without retaliation, without fear of being frowned upon or treated differently. And that can happen in several ways. Number 1, very basic level that, sometimes we overlook is just the dress code, a gender-neutral dress code. Just be allowing them to dress as they wish without retaliation, without having the forms of traditional skirt and pants and what that all means and what is indicative. Having gender-neutral dress codes helps solidify the notion that you're moving forward, that you are inclusive, that you are relative and relatable in this culture. Also, establishing pronoun guidelines. And you see it more and more burgeoning even now. They identify as I, or I identify as he, him, or she, or whatever that identity is, but allowing that, putting that actually raises awareness. It keeps it fresh in their mind. It keeps it illuminating their mind as you are trying to formulate and embed a new culture. Those reminders, though they may be softened, though they may not be, being a whole redoing everything, that always keeps a reminder. I myself, even when I see that, it reminds me of the sensitivity, of the awareness of how to handle, how to not take for granted what pronouns should or should not be used, or the very flexibility or fluidity of gender pronoun identity. So having that there is very vital, very good, a very good way. That doesn't cost a whole lot of money, doesn't cost a whole lot of investment in that part, but it does put into the psyche, into the mind, a reminder, a soft reminder. Also, avoiding gender stereotypes in written and verbal communication. Making sure that you are sensitive, that you're not using pronouns or adages or just different stereotypes embedded within your language, whether that's verbal and or written. So even revisiting the policies and looking at them and seeing if they're in there, refreshing them, and allowing it to have relevancy to the sensitivity of the LGBT community will do good. And then once you have changed it, send it out. Hey, we've updated with blah, 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 tell them what you did so that they are aware that you are conscious of their existence and their inclusiveness and their necessity in the organization and team, okay? Number 2, make diversity more than an HR function. Now, this has come up so many times that that's something that HR takes care of in diversity and inclusion. Well, no, you have to, if you are truly going to make it a culturally aware environment, it cannot reside, the onus cannot reside in the HR department. It cannot be, as far as being a manager or a director, that you are just simply check marking off an HR validation point and think that you're done. No, number 1, you need to make sure that it's personally your mantra, that you are a person that believes in the diversity of people. It does not mean necessarily that you agree with the lifestyle of, but that's not yours. What is yours is to make this a team, to make this business organization, this team organization work and move forward and value everybody, wherever they are in their journey of life, wherever they have identified. So you have to make number 1, and I believe that as a leadership life coach and executive coach and all that I am, I believe that you lead from the internal, that whoever you are bleeds out of you or is already energy flows from you, whether you try to or not. Your unconscious biases, your actual standpoints and what you believe in, your mantras and your truths, they come out whether you want them to or not. So you should want to check yourself to make sure that you are valuing everybody, regardless of how they identify, regardless of their beliefs, that it has to be something personal within you, and that all leaders, all managers on all levels know that this is what the organization stands for, that all team members know that this is what this team, whatever I manage, is that is what we are standing for, that is what we're going for, that is what we're looking to. So you have to, number 2, make sure that diversity is more than just an HR function, that it's not that you're going to get penalized or that someone is going to report you, but that this is actually just the way of life as you know it. Number 3, another problem that they feel is that it's unsafe to report inappropriate behavior. So your organization or your team, one way to combat that is to make sure that you develop an anonymous ombudsman that coordinates with HR to give those reports, to give those happenings, those inappropriate behaviors to the right people anonymously, so that it is freer to say that this is what's happening, but I don't want retaliation to come back on me because it's my leader or it's my team worker or however that looks. Make sure that you develop that you put that into practice, that you implement that into your organizational processes, that there is anonymous, so that they don't feel a threat of retaliation, of reach back on that. Number 4 is make diversity and inclusion strategies intersectional. Now, what does that mean? Now, you can find other videos that kind of help delineate and demystify a whole lot of that. But basically, you want to make sure that your strategies on all levels, on all platforms, are intersectional. So you want to offer training and programming that allows allying with the different strategies or different cultures and make it intersectional. You don't want it to be a we are doing this because of, but we're doing it including. We don't want to chiefly name LGBT, but we definitely want to include LGBT. We don't, whatever that those strategies are, make them intersectional. It feels more organic. It feels more natural versus we got to do this or we fear so we do this. No, because we actually believe in it, because we support it, because we are that, we do it including you, not because of you. Does that make sense? Now, we know that there is a because. We know that there is a need, but the need doesn't drive us. We recognize the need as a way to highlight what we believe and how we can fix it, how we can alter it. Those are 4 ways that you can include this into your programming, into your team and organization.
Right. Hello, I'm Eva Medilek, and I'm here to share how you can create inclusive environments by developing communication skills that overcome barriers of assumption. As we seek to create inclusivity in our communities, we need to advocate for the listening to the voices, the stories, and the experiences of people on the margins of society. But how can we confront biases and racism when we see it? Confronting subconscious bias requires you to approach things in an inclusive way, and most people have not been taught how to do that. And it's not the job of minoritized folks and marginalized communities to educate others about their blind spots and privileges. There are techniques that we can develop that will make these conversations and confrontations less painful and more productive for everyone. And it starts by simply listening. Creating inclusive environments starts with broadening your listening capacity, because listening is a key practice in creating connections and breaking down racial and cultural barriers. Pain, fear, and distrust dissipate when someone knows that they have been heard and understood. And the more skilled you become at listening, the better you are able to build relationships and create safe, inclusive environments. Listening has the ability to break down racial and cultural barriers. However, listening is one of the toughest skills to master. Listening demands being fully present. It demands that we put aside our fears, our anticipation. It demands putting aside our prepared responses and our reactionary defenses. We must put aside our assumptions of what we think we know or understand and be open to a curiosity to gain additional information for deeper understanding. You see, most people make biased statements at an unconscious level. And when it happens, it's important to know the kind of culture that you're dealing with. You see, the key is to describe the bias without attacking the person. For example, as an educated Black woman, I often have people comment that I'm so articulate, and on the surface, that sounds like a compliment. One incident that I recall is back when I was pregnant with my first child, and I ended up in the hospital. I remember hearing the doctors discussing my condition behind the curtain, because those thin curtains do a really good job of keeping your conversations private. But they described me as a 26-year-old intelligent Black woman. Now, that was over 36 years ago, and I still remember thinking, well, would the other choice be a 26-year-old ignorant Black woman? I didn't call it out then, but here's how I would approach it today. I know you mean articulate as a compliment, but when you say that to or about a person of color, there's an assumption that comes with it. May I share that with you? You see, now I have the opportunity and the permission to approach this from a learning perspective and not with an intent to shame someone who might want to listen and learn. This is also not an opportunity to lecture them, because when we shy away from our feelings, we tend to only want to stick with the facts, and facts don't have much power in getting people to think that they're wrong. Humans don't make decisions that way in charged situations. We make gut responses. And the idea here is to see biased statements as an opportunity to build a bridge rather than destroy it. So what I'd like to do now is share a framework of inclusive and influential listening with you. And I call this framework the LAPI listening framework. And this framework serves to deepen understanding while also creating the feeling of being heard or acknowledged without judgment and or criticism. So the first is the L, listen. Listening is a key practice in building relationships across differences. Listening to each other creates connection. It breaks down racial and cultural barriers because culture guides how we use language, how we view appropriateness, and how we hold our own worldview. Listening to each other helps us become more familiar with the perspective of others compared to our own. The A is acknowledge. Listening with effective acknowledgement will help you understand another person's message, even when what they are sharing is outside of your own life experience or worldview. You see, acknowledgement allows other person to feel seen, to feel heard and understood and valued. And our natural instinct when we listen is to judge, editorialize, analyze, or offer solution rather than simply acknowledging what has been said. So we acknowledge by paraphrasing. The goal of paraphrasing is to communicate our understanding of what the speaker is saying. It confirms that what that speaker was trying to say was received accurately, and it acknowledges both the content and the emotion of that speaker's perspective. Reflecting back or paraphrasing is not telling another person that you understand, because you don't. We each experience life differently, and saying that you understand may cut off the other person from further sharing with you. Paraphrasing is also not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's about letting the person know that you're listening and not judging. Now, what happens if the conversation becomes uncomfortable or emotional? What if you believe that people are wrong in what they're saying? Challenge yourself to get curious instead of furious. Your only job here is to accurately understand what that person is telling you. So how are you going to slow down and keep an open mind and seek understanding and practice this art of bridge building when those conversations become charged and uncomfortable? Well, first, you've got to be aware of your barriers of assumption. These assumptions, especially those related to race and gender and culture, can present a barrier to clear, empathetic, and non-judgmental communication. Awareness of your racial and cultural assumptions will equip you to notice when you have confused your assumptions with the facts. So regardless of if you're the target of microaggressions, guilty of microaggressions, or a witness to microaggressions, the work is the same. You must increase understanding to decrease defensiveness and open the channels of communication to invite the inquiry, which leads us to the I. inquire. And I'm just going to share this quote with you from The Art of Powerful Questions. Questions open the door to dialogue and discovery. They are an invitation to creativity and breakthrough thinking. Questions can lead to movement and action on key issues by generating creative insights that can ignite change. So one would wonder, if asking good questions is so critical to discovery, why we don't spend more time, energy, and effort on asking them. Now that our systemic issues are at the forefront and diverse perspectives are now required more than ever to foster sustainable solutions, the need to ask deeper questions that challenge the status quo assumptions is critical in fostering a more inclusive and positive future. We use questions to deepen understanding, but not just any random questions. We ask powerful questions, and powerful questions foster thinking, exploration, forward movement, collaboration, creativity, and solutions. Open-ended questions need to be asked as opposed to closed-ended questions. So a general rule of open-ended questions would be to start with what or how. And this creates space for that forward movement, solutions, collaborations, and clearer understanding of the situation or the problem. A closed-ended question is anything that can be answered with a simple yes or no, and that can shut the conversation down. So I'm going to share my screen with you one more time. Developing the skill of using powerful questions isn't always easy. So what I've done is I've compiled a list of powerful questions from The Art of Powerful Questions for you to use as a guide. So just go to the link that I have here on the screen, or you can just scan the QR code and download it for yourselves. So I'll give you a minute to do that, or you can just pause this recording and do it. But what I want to do is, as I leave you with a quote. You can tell whether a man is clever by his answers, and you can tell whether a man is wise by his questions. Thank you for your time. It was my pleasure to share this information with you.
Hello there. Today, I'm going to talk to you about diverse perspectives and the power of intersectionality. Picture it, a young Black girl growing up on the west side of the city of Detroit, only 2 blocks over from 12th Street, where the 1967 riots were ignited. Now imagine that same girl who's ready to graduate from the top high school in the city of Detroit with honors, doubting her self-worth and not understanding her own value. You see, when you don't know who you are, you will adopt someone else's narrative where the heroes look like them and the villains look like you. That young girl, by the age of 22, had been married and divorced and was now the mother of 2 sons. Fast forward a few years, she was remarried and is now the mother of 5 children. A Black woman in an urban city with 5 children. The assumption would be that she's on government assistance, not working, doesn't have any employable skills, but no. This woman has navigated every storm thrown her way, completed 2 bachelor's degrees, 1 master's degree, and a doctorate because she refused to accept someone else's narrative about her. By now, you may have realized that that young girl is me. My first full-time job was in a trilingual classroom where the students and parents spoke English, Spanish, and Arabic, while I only spoke English. That was my immersion in diversity. Until my children were in school all day, I left my full-time teaching job to become a licensed group home daycare. That was my entry into the workplace as an entrepreneur, so I learned about workplace inclusion. When I was ready to re-enter the workforce full-time, I applied to 54 jobs and received 0 interviews. After 18 months, I had to accept a temporary position just to get my foot in the door. Excelling from that position, I was able to achieve full-time employment while working in higher education with students who were the first in their families to graduate from college. That taught me about equity. The organization that gave me my first college scholarship recruited me to be on their board of directors, where I eventually became president of the board of directors. I learned about nonprofits and community engagement in that role. Through careful observation, I watched how multiple institutions encouraged their Black, Indigenous, people of color to bring their children to work with them on the days that they just happened to be filming ads or capturing new images so that the company would appear to be diverse, even though it was only on their websites and brochures. The opposite was to highlight that same person of color year after year after year, as if no one was taking notice. From that, I learned that my lens is powerful. As a caregiver for my father who had Parkinson's, I got a firsthand view of navigating mobility and physical challenges. As a caregiver for my mother who had dementia, I learned about mental, emotional, and psychological concerns of daily living. As the mother to a lupus warrior, I also became a champion for hidden disabilities. Accessibility then got added to my perspective. Now, what I've just described to you is the power of intersectionality. I've shared just a few snapshots from my own life because of how I view the world, and it has made me a powerful advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It has sensitized me to the needs of the most vulnerable populations in our society. It has also activated me to face new challenges and implement deliberate, simultaneous efforts as the Vice President of Diversity and Community Engagement. Hello, my name is Dr. DeAndrea Matthews. I am a National Diversity Council certified diversity professional, and I'm here to remind you that everything you've been through adds to your value as a diverse, complex individual with something to contribute. And I'm just here to remind you to own it. Thank you for joining me for Diverse Perspectives, the power of intersectionality. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can do so at Dr. DC Matthews. That's DRDCMATTHEWS. I look forward to connecting with you. Thanks so much.
Hello, Black Speakers Network. My name is Rizzo, and I'm bringing you the King Kongan mindset. What does King Kongan means? What does Queen Kongan means? Well, Kongan means that you're a soldier, you're a warrior, you're a conqueror, you're blessed by the best, you're highly favored. Any obstacles that get in your way, you will get through them. And that's the mindset that I have and that I always had, except for 20 years ago when I was going through depression. Just for a moment. And then I needed an uplift. I had nothing, no job, and I needed to grind. So I started thinking, what can I do to give me that uplift? And I remember, I'm 23 years old, and I remember, wait a minute, I'm the one that held Kobe Bryant to his lowest career total. In high school, only 8 points. That's Kobe's lowest. I'm D'ing him up. I'm the defensive specialist. So I always had that relentless ability to be up in your face, intense. I had it, but at this time, 20 years ago, I didn't. I lost it. So I said, why don't I find that VHS tape and try to show people? Or really, I think my mind was saying, I just wanted to see it for myself just to make me happy because I see Kobe Bryant on TV every week in the NBA, straight out of high school. But here I am, the Kobe stopper. So I'm searching for it. Can't find it. Went to the high school, can't find it. Called the old coach, he doesn't have it. So I started putting messages out. Literally 8 months go by and some kid contacted me and said, I have the Kobe footage of you shutting him down. Right then, I'm smiling. This is 8 months later. So also with this Kongan mindset, I believe in whatever you focus on, it will expand. And that's what I'm going to bring every single time I speak. My topic is about networking is your net worth. And whatever you focus on will expand. So I focused on trying to find this VHS tape. 8 months later, I received it. Now I have it. I'm feeling good. I'm laughing. And I said, I want to show the world. But it's on VHS. So I had to focus and learn how to edit. How can I get this VHS tape onto the computer and edit? So I studied. I didn't go to school for editing. Not knowing what I'm about to do is create a multi-million-dollar business because of Kobe Bryant. So I did the highlight video. I take it to the gymnasium where there's a basketball showcase going on. And I'm just showing it off on my laptop. Coaches are starting to come around, gathering, looking at this video playing. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. I have my uplift now. But I didn't know that I was networking at the time. I'm young, still immature, still got a lot to learn. But I'm communicating with this coach and that coach, and they're saying to me, who made the video? I said, Coach, how much would you pay me to do your highlight for your team? He said, last year we paid someone $1,200. $1,200. Remember this, whatever you focus on will expand. So I focus on this VHS trying to find it, and I found it. Now I have it. Now I focus on trying to edit. And then I got all the pieces to edit this, and I learned how to edit without going to school. And now it's expanding. Now I'm in a gymnasium, gathering around coaches. I'm networking, doing something that I never did before. Now we're talking about business, team highlights, filming stuff, editing it for the school. $1,200, he said, last year he paid. I told him right then, I'll do it for $600. He said, you're hired. That day, I got my first job just by showing a highlight tape of Kobe Bryant that I focused on for months just to get. Now, 2 months later, another coach from that gym told me, I need you, Rizzo. I need a video, just like you did Coach Johnson. I said, I got you. He says, I'm paying you $1,000. Right then, I got my LLC. I said, networking is a key to success. I can go to any gymnasium and show them these highlight videos. And at that time, no one was in the gymnasiums filming high school basketball at camps in Pennsylvania but me. I created my business. Kobe Bryant, that footage helped me. It jump-started my whole company. What I focused on, it expanded. So now I'm networking in gymnasiums. I'm meeting so many different people in life. And I kept networking, kept receiving cards, business cards. So I started collecting the cards in a photo album. My photo album was filled with so many business cards. It's crazy. Networking is the key to success. In that photo album, I at least contacted 10 different people throughout the years that I made so much money with. Partners. So my company, Rizzo Production Cam Media, became a multi-million-dollar company throughout the years, filming all kinds of people, leading me to Master P, leading me to Snoop Dogg. So when I speak, I want people to understand you can be down, you can have nothing, But whatever you focus on, it will expand. Just like 25 years ago, I met Snoop Dogg and he told me no. I said, hey, I'm 19 years old. I'm like, hey Snoop, can I work with you? He told me no. And now 25 years later, I'm marketing Snoop's cereal that's making history this June in every store. I'm side by side with Master P, the biggest entrepreneur that we have. I'm learning the failures. I'm learning the mistakes. I'm learning every single day how to be better in this business, how to be a better entrepreneur, how to take a product and get it into stores. So I want to uplift other people. I want to uplift our people. I want to let them know that I had nothing and now I have something. Just because I focused on something and it expanded. I spoke things into existence and it came true. I believe in our God and I'm highly favored. I want to come to any organization and I want to speak and I want to tell my stories. Had a sister shot and killed. Had a brother shot and killed. A sister drowned and a best friend shot and killed. Every obstacle that came up, I turned my pain into purpose. So Snoop, I was 19 years old. You remember that moment when I came up to you and I'm like, yo, Snoop, I'm trying to get down. But you know one thing that Master P taught me, for real, and he taught you too. I'm saying it's about building a relationship.
Right.
You can't just on a limb trust somebody or say, hey, yo, I'm going to put you down. 25 years later, here, me and you.
Yeah,
like,
you put
that's
your work
nothing.
in. It's all about the work that you put in. Basically, what the message is, you know, someone could tell you, they could speak to you and say, you're not ready or I can't get down with you. The point is, you got to take your initiatives and take your will and your strength and build up what you're supposed to be. And if you're supposed to be who you are, then eventually you'll be right where you need to be.